I am so happy to have the world's most phenomenal singer, and I say that without any reservation at all, Kim Chandler. It's amazing to have you finally in the hot seat of Radio Richard. So thank you for being here.
Well, today it's very much the hot seat,
Yeah,
given the fact that you're there in LA, I'm here in Marbella in southern Spain, and we are in the midst of a heat wave right now, and boy, are we feeling it.
right. Well, you'll be feeling a different kind of heat, or rather, my listeners will be feeling a different kind of heat, because I hope you're going to rant on the few subjects that I've chosen to ask you about. One of the things that people, of course, know about you, but should know about you, is that you're not only a phenomenal singer, but you're a phenomenal teacher of singers, and you've coached many, many well-known singers, and you've coached many, many not so well-known singers who are nevertheless charming and lovely. The demands of the industry currently, using technology such as auto-tune, Melodyne, Vocal Line, all of these things,
Yep.
and the TV contest shows of which you've coached many people for,
Yeah.
and they seem to be won by singers who sing in a certain way and higher and faster licks and all of that stuff. And it
Yep.
seems to me to have created a kind of a clone voice. In other words, a thing that you have to kind of, okay, this is what you have to do, hit that, do that, and you can get on all these shows and you can do contemporary records which sound a certain way.
Mm.
Now, do singers come to you saying, I want to sound like X? Is that what they generally do?
Sometimes they do, particularly if they're in the very early stages of their singing career and they feel that they can't necessarily rely on their own unique voice. And can I just state from the outset, just to remind everybody, that your voice print is as unique as your fingerprints. So every single voice that has ever lived on the planet is utterly unique. So
Hmm.
whilst we have impersonators and impressionists and things like that that can imitate a voice to a certain level that fools us, it certainly won't fool like spectrographic analysis and things like that. Otherwise, voice activated security systems wouldn't work. The reason they do work is because we are utterly unique, each one of us. So um, really, from my standpoint, it makes kind of no sense to try to sound like somebody else, because you really are always going to be best sounding like yourself, and it's best to optimize and develop the best aspects of your own voice, climb your own mountain, develop your own career, and get to know and love your unique instrument rather than try to copy somebody else's unique instrument, which you'll only ever be second best.
Knowing that, how many singers really want that? Do they want to be unique, or do they want to get on those shows? Do they want to get signed because they sound a certain way?
It really depends on the person. Because I coach people who live from their singing voices, so they have to either be a professional singer, which is a jobbing singer doing covers
Right,
gigs and
right.
recording sessions and things. Those people don't want to be an artist. They just want to, make a living out of being a professional singer, and that's a very much a worthy goal and something I've done myself for quite a while now,
Quite a
uh,
while.
over 30 years. And I never wanted to be an artist. It was never, ever, ever on my radar. Even though it had been offered to me several times across, the decades, it's never been something that I've wanted to do. However, for the people who do want to go down that sort of covers path, they don't need to have a particularly signature, unique, identifiable sound. Their gig actually is to be quite generic. So it really depends. Whereas the people who have artist literally stamped on their forehead, and
Hmm.
they want to make a unique contribution to the world, and thank goodness, for the artists that we have, um, they have a vested interest in having that and developing that signature sound. So
Right.
it really depends on the person and what their own brief is. But just getting back to what I was kind of saying before about people early in their career may not necessarily have that security yet in in themselves and their uniqueness, and sometimes they feel perhaps the pressure to borrow strength from somebody who's already made it, someone who's proved their mettle. I mean, METTLE, not
Yes, I
MET.
understand. Yes,
Right,
that's
yeah.
right. Because I know you do
I,
teach. I know you coach a
I do.
lot of heavy metal people too.
I do. So I just wanted to kind of
Yeah,
clarify that point.
yeah.
So that's probably where I come across that more often, the people who are trying to make it, who are trying to get noticed. They feel perhaps a pressure
Hmm.
to go with the tried and true kind of sound.
Hmm. Instead of trying to turn an ostrich into an elephant, you should develop to be the best ostrich you can possibly be.
Yeah. I
Without
mean,
stick, I say that without sticking my neck
like,
out.
yeah, yeah. Now the other analogy where the fish is looking at a tree, and like, should it feel bad for the fact that it can't fly up to the tree branches? It's like, but it's a fish. So it's all about us knowing where we operate best, where we need to be, where we're going to flourish.
Yeah, and if he stays in the
Right.
water, at least he'll get paid scale.
Oh God. Oh, I missed your jokes, Richard.
So let me ask this question. Somebody comes to you and they say they do want to sound like X. Now, what's interesting for me is that you say that each singer has their own unique vocal imprint, and it's
Yeah,
absolutely true. But also, what I love about you is that you understand what you have to do in order to make your voice sound like X. In other words,
yeah.
let me ask this question. What specific technique would you say a singer would need to sound like Ella Fitzgerald, for instance?
Like Ella. I mean, God, literally, again, one of the best singers that's ever graced this earth.
That's right.
And we share a birthday. Just
Oh,
saying.
how nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. And she's literally one of my favorite singers on the planet. Um, you, Ella's actual sound, it's just very, very smooth and
Exactly.
very consistent from one
Mhm.
end of her range to the other. The fact that she has such a wide range, so you would need to be working on smoothing out the lot, consistency, and extending your range so that it is absolutely accessible, agile, flexible, and ridiculously musical and accurate,
Absolutely.
with
And
with incredible ideas to boot. I mean, the fact that, I mean, her level of creativity
yes,
was off the chart. It seemingly felt to me when I listened to her that her voice is almost limitless. We know that that's not possible. She's a human being, right? But it was so responsive. Her technique was so perfect that anything that her creative mind went to do, her voice seemed capable of actually going there.
indeed. But I mean, obviously the musicality of it is a whole
Other
different
thing.
kettle
Yeah.
of fish since you're
Yeah.
talking about fish.
Yeah.
But but
Not talking
I'm
about fish because it's near dinner time here, and I'm
yes, well,
hungry.
I'll don't worry, we'll finish soon. I don't
Oh
know.
dear Lord.
Okay, but let me just ask about this. Let's ignore her incredible chops, musical
Yeah.
chops, and
Yeah.
improvisation chops, and
Yeah.
her phrasing, which is just so
Okay. Yeah.
beautiful and musical. But let's talk about the sound, the
Yeah.
actual vocal sound. Now, give me an example of what you would say to female singers, obviously, to achieve that consistency that you talked about and the consistency in the different ranges, because it's something that I noticed very early on about your voice is that you can produce the same sound and the same volume, mind you, for the microphone, because you're such a genius in the studio, if you're low or middle or high. It's the same, it hits the needle at the same point, because it's almost as if you've got your own compressor in your voice. But how do you practice that? Give me an exercise that you could give to people to achieve that consistency of tone.
In my case, it has been honed over decades in the studio, because I record every day pretty much.
Right.
So the studio is my more familiar performing environment. So I've learnt to kind of have that consistency, that kind of internal compression effect, just so I don't have to create such hard work for any of the producers that I work with.
Yes, or your poor husband.
For my yes, who these days is doing probably a lot more of my production than anybody else. A typical kind of smoothing out sort of exercise is actually portamentos, because the voice shares the pitch continuum capacity with alongside the swanee whistle, the trombone, the string family. Yeah,
yes.
We are the only instruments that can do all pitch, right? So obviously, the guitar, being a string instrument, of course, can slide, right?
Yes.
Piano can't.
No.
Because we have this pitch continuum capacity, it is a very useful exercise to do portamento, or what we actually more accurately describe as siren exercises, because of the fact that they smooth the muscular kind of coordination out. Would you like me to demonstrate one?
I would very much like you to demonstrate. Thank you, Kimmy.
They're not particularly pretty, but they are functional, because portamento exercises are not musically satisfying. They're there to build smoothness,
the muscles of your actual vocal cords, right?
That's it. The coordination, the stretch, how that all kind of works. So I hope I do a good one. Here we go. It just needs to be nice and fluid and responsive.
Let me ask, is it necessary to roll your tongue like that?
That's just one of what's called the semi-occluded vocal tract family of exercises, which are beautifully balanced in all sorts of regards, but most particularly like air pressure balance. They give your voice the best conditions by which to operate.
But what if you can't do that rolling?
Actually, there's quite a few people who can't. So fortunately, there are loads and loads of other ones, such as the lip trill version.
Oh, I see.
You can do which is very attractive, or z, v, z.
But it's all of these things are meant to offer. Thank you. I like that one.
Raspberry.
Yeah. People do that when they hear my arrangement.
That one's hilarious because it literally puts spit all over the screen.
Nice. Tell me this, is the purpose of those different things, the purpose is to provide kind of a barrier to hold in the sound. Is that the idea?
Effectively, if you look at what semi-occluded would mean, sort of partially blocked, semi-occluded vocal tract. The vocal tract is the area from the lips to the larynx. Yes. And it creates this favorable back pressure that gives the vocal cords the perfect conditions by which to vibrate.
Okay.
Which is why we do these crazy ass sounds for warm-ups, for cool downs. I mean, why else would we do such ugly sounding and looking things unless the voice loved it?
Right. And tell me this, in terms of range, you talked about, obviously Ella had a ridiculous range, and some singers do have a ridiculous range. But what interests me very much is singers who can sing full voice in way high or way low, and it doesn't matter. Now, I had the great experience, which you can hear on Radio Richard, my interview with Michael McDonald. I'm sure you have heard it.
Who?
But
Who?
oh, that guy. So
Oh, one of my favorite ever all-time artists that
yes,
you, Mr. Richard, gave me the honor and privilege of doing background vocals with, and that I will never ever forget that.
well, what a fun night that was.
I shall be indebted for the rest of my life on that one.
Well, the indebtedness is mutual. But here's the thing I was saying. I got to do an interview with him where I sat right next to him on the piano bench.
Yeah,
you know, he was on my right. I'm sitting here, and he's showing
heaven.
me.
That is the seat of heaven.
Yeah, it was the seat of heaven, and he was playing the piano, and I was listening to him sing, obviously, and he was showing me how he accompanied himself in different ways.
Yeah.
But listening to his voice, I noticed that whether he was singing in his typical Michael McDonald high sound with the eyebrows, you know, that sound, or low, the volume was exactly the same, and it was very soft. Now that amazed me. I mean, he doesn't sing that loud. It's not loudness. It's just.
So and again, a very, very, very accomplished and experienced studio singer. So unsurprising that consistency is kind of there again. But I think in Michael's case specifically, what interests me as a vocal mechanic, in inverted commas, is how high he can sing, where he doesn't sound like he's singing that high because he has such a tubular, bottom-endy sound in his tonal balance, that it's a bit misleading when you try to sing along with it. Is actually when you realize how high he's singing, because that lowered larynx position that he sings with gives the illusion that it's in fact lower than it is.
Yes, indeed. But tell me this, there's a certain sound that he gets, which I call a kind of a covered sound. It's as if the sound is just bathed in a covering of beautiful, warm treacle or whatever it is. It's a sort of it's a soft thing. And how does he do that? What has to happen in the larynx to do that?
Well, as I was just saying then, he's one of the few pop singers, the term used in its most widest term. He is one of the few that sings with what sounds to me like a lowered larynx. So his larynx sits a little lower in his throat, which lengthens the vocal tract that I was referring to before, which is the tube within which everything resonates, and we get our natural EQ, our natural balance of treble and bass and mids and things before it goes into any microphone, because you were sitting there listening to him acoustically, right? So he has his own natural balance to EQ. We all do. Before anything else can kind of mess with the EQ electronically, we have our own internal balance anyway.
Sure.
So if you want me to
I do want you to demonstrate.
Yeah, so the larynx position is a real game changer. You don't have to move it much inside the throat for there to be a rather marked net effect on the tone, right?
Show us, Kimmy.
So I shall. Here's a piano right beside me. I realize you can't see it, but
no, can't see you either.
If I was to do my natural larynx position, looking out on the morning rain, that's where mine naturally sits without me messing with it. I used to feel so uninspired. So that's my natural one. Sounds quite like my speaking voice. Is no big mismatch. So would you like me to go raised larynx or lowered larynx first?
Raised.
Okay. Looking out on the morning rain, I used to feel so uninspired. Lowered. Looking out on the morning rain, I used to feel so uninspired. Sorry, went up slightly.
That's okay. But that was a beautiful demonstration. So Michael McDonald obviously is the lowered.
It's the same pitch, but it gives the illusion, because I haven't changed the key, right? Obviously, I haven't. But it gives the illusion when I sing with a raised larynx that the
Yeah.
whole thing has gone up, right?
So
And when
how would you show
with the lowered
somebody
larynx,
how would you show somebody how to do that? How would you
how do you
explain?
manipulate the larynx position?
Yeah,
The,
tell.
the, the larynx, which is the cartilage box that we call the voice box as well. The larynx is the house in which the vocal cords live, right? Just so you understand. It can move up and down inside the throat.
Yes.
So when you swallow, it goes up. When you yawn, it goes down. So
Ah,
it is quite mobile. It's got
right,
several muscles that lift it up, several muscles that pull it down, and depending on what you need the larynx to do in any given time, that pulley system is in
right,
place.
right,
So the lowered larynx is kind of more feeling like you're sending your larynx to the basement.
right.
The raised larynx is sending it up to the top floor
Yes.
as if it was an elevator,
But is
right?
this something you
And
could teach somebody how to do, actually do it?
with experimentation, yeah, if you kind of show them, what is happening when they swallow, and you can feel it going up, and when they yawn, they feel it go down. It's like, oh right, I do actually have some conscious control over this. But that said, it's not something that I like to manipulate much, even though I've just demonstrated for you how that can work.
Beautifully.
Voices generally operate best in neutral larynx position. That's where people who speak with a normal speaking voice. I'm not talking about a really weird speaking voice or a really weird speaking voice, but
Right,
somewhere
right.
somewhere in the middle, right? The reason it gravitates to where it does for normal speaking is because that's where it's most comfortable. That's where the larynx is happy to be. That's
Yeah.
where it functions best. That's where you get the most natural balance of EQ for you
Hmm.
as a pop singer. In the classical tradition, they actually do want you to have a relaxedly lowered larynx position because
Right.
they want that tubular sound as
Yeah.
part of the aesthetic of classical singing. However, as pop singers, we want to sound as natural as possible generally.
Right.
It's more naturalistic. And so as a result of that, the larynx position just being kind of where you speak,
Right.
I find generally is the best position for most people.
Okay.
But
So,
but if you're a character voice artist, you're going to be
uh,
manipulating your larynx position probably quite routinely.
indeed, indeed.
Yes.
Well, I'm now going to ask you about another type of singer. And if somebody said, I'd like to sing like Janice Joplin,
Fine.
that's a whole different world.
Yeah.
And it's all
Yep.
that rasp, that crackling,
Yep.
that sound.
Hey. Yes.
Exactly. Now, how did you do
Yeah.
that?
Practice. And I'm very pleased to say that it wasn't something that I could do until about God 12 years ago or thereabouts is when I started going, actually, yep, I think I can do this. Because you probably haven't really heard me do much rock distortion or rock.
Only a little bit.
There you go. So it never was something that I thought I could do, that I thought I was Miss Clean Voice and that was my lot in life. And I
Right.
had kind of accepted that. But then I met a wonderful Danish colleague called Catherine Sadelin of complete vocal technique fame. Her whole institute and that method is all based in Copenhagen. I actually had the privilege of proofreading the second edition of the English edition of her book. But she was the first person to ever tell me, and it blew my mind at the time, that anyone, any singer, even classical singers, opera singers, folk singers,
Right.
anyone can learn how to do vocal distortion. And I
Right.
went, that cannot be true. Surely it's just people like Janice Joplin or Brian Adams or
Right. Right.
Bon Jovi or whoever,
Tom Waits.
Rod Stewart,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Bonnie Tyler, right? So
Yes.
the
Yes.
Kim Carnes,
Yes.
these are just voices that are born like that. They are just lucky people that have that grit and good on them.
Yeah.
But for people like me, Miss Clean Voice, no can do. And she said,
Yes.
no, you're wrong. It is just a technique that anybody can learn.
Right.
So it was only when I actually started experimenting with it, having been given the permission from her,
Yes.
and the knowledge that it could be done, I thought,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm going to put this to the test. And lo and behold, she was right.
Could you show me the very basic sort of things that you would tell a student to say, okay, the first thing you've got to do is X?
Yeah.
How would they,
Okay.
nuts and bolts?
The very first thing that I will say to anybody that wants to do vocal distortion is that you already need to have a robust vocal technique that's reliable and stable and consistent. Anything that's not quite right, something as hardcore as adding grit and distortion could be enough to kind of, upset the apple cart, shall we say.
Right.
Sometimes if someone's really, really never gone there before, we'll start with something super duper light and easy, like creak, which is just so that they can actually hear themselves doing a voice that's pitchless, mostly
Right.
pitchless. It's actually very, very low pitch, but we might do something like this.
It's
Like,
the same as vocal fry, is it not?
it's exactly this, and pulse register and
Right.
strobus, right? So they're all various names in different sources for the same thing. Say we took like Aerosmith's Walk This Way. We might do walk this way,
Right.
talk this way, just so they get used to actually hearing their voice relatively pitchless.
Right.
And it's so easy, it's light, it doesn't kind of freak anybody out, but it's not particularly useful for projection, shall we say,
Right.
to
Right.
go out trying to sound like Elmer Fudd, right?
Right.
But as a starting point to get people kind of, initiated into this type of thing, then it's not a bad place to start.
And then do you add note to it?
No, not that one, not that particular one. But how you could is you can use creak as an onset and an offset, like Britney does. Oh baby, baby,
Right.
that type of thing,
Right.
right? And Enrique Iglesias is another one that loves being creaky. So creakiness is useful, but just not particularly useful as a long-term distortion kind of
Okay. Yes.
strategy. Yeah,
No, it's an affectation that a lot of singers use today.
that's it. But I just use it as an arrowhead to say, okay, this is what you sound like relatively pitchless. So then some other, I use a lot of playful things like childhood sounds and stuff. So if we go into growl, say, rah, I might say to people, let's have a bit of fun. Let's not be so adult right now. And let's pretend to be a motorbike. Vroom, vroom, vroom.
Nice.
Or, let's pretend to be a tiger. Rah. Or, let's pretend to be a dive bombing plane. Rah. Or a racing car or whatever. And
Right.
most adults as kids probably made these noises, right?
Right.
So
Right.
even though we know, thanks to Catherine's research on hundreds of people with cameras down their noses looking at what their voices are doing, we know functionally that the arytenoid cartilages are drumming against the epiglottis. Thanks to her. That doesn't help you one jot to make the sound. Just because you know that that's actually how it's being done, we don't have much conscious control over those structures.
Right.
So it's kind of, just an easier road to go the imitative route.
Right.
So anyway, that's growl. Then you've got a really cute one, which is rattle, which is actually where spit becomes an ally.
Right.
The phlegmier, the better.
Right.
Imagine that you're a cat, like ejecting a fur ball.
Oh, I see. Right.
So by
Wow.
the time you actually add it to a note,
Uh-huh.
it's surprisingly easy
Yeah.
because it's actually the uvula, the
Right.
little dangly bit which is quite a way away from your vocal cords. It's actually the uvula that's drumming.
Yes, but tell me, when you're doing that, how do you avoid harming yourself? Because it sounds like you
I
would.
know it sounds like I am, but as I just said, those structures are so far from each other. Where my vocal cords are, which is right safely housed inside my larynx, versus where my uvula is, that's quite a distance.
I see. Okay.
Right? So it sounds like it's crazy and demonic or whatever,
Okay.
and damaging,
Right.
but it's an illusion. It really, really isn't. So where you'll hear a gorgeous example of rattle is the opening note of Stevie Wonder's Signed, Sealed, Delivered, where he goes, ah, oh yeah, baby, right? It's
Right.
got the ah, and that's
Right.
a really great example of
Excellent.
filthy old rattle. Then you've got grunt, and grunt is really the kind of death metal-y sort of sound.
Right.
That type of thing where everything's kind of flapping in the wind on that one. So
Right.
it's fairly fringe, so I'm not going to probably go much more into that one. And then the final one for today is actual distortion, which is the false vocal folds, which are some structures that live just above the actual vocal cords, what we call the true vocal cords or vocal folds. That's the one that I started with.
Right.
Hey, hey, hey! That one that's just got that's quite gritty. It's kind of rocky, gritty.
It sure is.
Yeah, and that's the one that personally I find is easiest to get wrong because the structures are so close to the true vocal folds.
Right.
So that one kind of requires the most work to get comfortable and accessible and repeatable
Right.
and sustainable without it actually kind of making you cough or upset your voice in some
Right.
way. But you can see that I can do it, and there's no vocal trauma. If there was vocal trauma, I'd be coughing, clearing my throat. There'd be some
No, sure.
evidence of the fact that that's actually.
But tell me this. Let's just say the other side of the coin. Let's say a singer comes to you and they say, Kim, I've got vocal trauma. What do I do? So they say I'm going. I've got a set of gigs I've got to do. My voice is already tired. What am I going to do? Help me, Kim. What do you say to them?
Yes, well, welcome to a fair amount of the work that I do these
Indeed.
days because
That's why I asked.
yeah, anyone who deals with people making a living out of their voice, all the way from the professional singer through to the arena filling artist, they all deal with this quite routinely because when people are out on tour, the tour schedules can be absolutely punishing. A run of gigs for even a gigging singer doing a show can be punishing, and so the tired voice, the overused voice phenomenon is a very, very real thing. I can't actually give you specifics because the antidote, as it were, is specific to exactly that person's voice, the type of gig they've got to do, the level of fatigue, or are they actually tipping into vocal injury territory? All of that matters as to how you deal with it. So quite routinely, I am working with the team. So ENT doctors, speech therapists, singing rehab coaches, and myself in that role, I'm called a habilitation coach. So what a habilitation coach is, I'm generally if someone is injured and is kind of getting the voice back online again, I'm the last port of call. So say they go to ENT first. If the ENT, or ear, nose and throat surgeon, has to do something, they do something. If they don't, they move them on to the next stage, which is the speech therapist. So then the speech therapist works with all the muscles and vocal function. If they are a singer, quite often a singing rehab coach will come in at that point as well. And where I come in is when they're brought back to baseline health and they need to rebuild athletically to get back to athletic voice usage where they've got to be able to sing hours a night without losing their voice. That's what I help them with.
Yeah.
So that's, generally entails things like physical conditioning, where they've got to do a requisite amount of cardio and core strength work, flexibility in their body, and daily voice building, daily voice gym stuff, which is where my funky and fun exercises come in.
Yes, and let me just stop you right there, because those funky and fun exercises, I have to give you an extra plug right now because they're just so fabulous.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
they
you,
are.
darling.
And
So,
everyone should have it.
but what the point of them is, the way I've designed them is to be the kind of, from my standpoint, ideal mixture of a range of technique building exercises, like different machines at the gym. Like we take our whole body into a gym, but
Hmm.
each machine has a focus. And that's really what vocal exercises are like. You're taking your whole voice to the vocal practice or to voice gym, but each exercise has a focus, and so that's why it's so important to do a range of things so
Hmm.
that you're watering the whole vocal garden, as it were,
Oh,
not
thank you.
just not just your favorite bit.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
right. And musicianship, which
Can,
which to me, there's no point to the whole thing unless the ears are also getting the same amount of attention as the voice is.
can you give me an example in your enormous experience? Who was the most difficult student that you had? You don't even have to mention their name if you don't want to, who had a problem that you had a hard time actually solving?
There's really only one that's coming to mind because it actually came up today, believe it or not. There was a lovely, lovely girl who came to me in London many years ago. This has got to be at least 15 years ago. She's not the sort of client I would take on now because I only coach the professional and signed artist end. She came along highly motivated, highly dedicated, very enthusiastic, but literally completely pitch impaired and timing impaired.
Ooh.
She could not sing a note in tune, and she couldn't even clap along to a song in time when she wasn't singing.
Hmm.
Right. So not even, not even distracted by singing. I just said, can you clap along with this song? No, she couldn't.
Oh,
Right.
boy.
So I thought, whoa, okay, this is really going to test me and and what can be done. And I had no idea whether either of these two things could be adequately addressed. But I just said to her, look, let's do our best. Let's see where we end up. So I didn't make her any empty promises or anything like that you're going to be a star, darling, in a year. I mean, I've seen ridiculous things like something I read somewhere where some vocal coach was claiming from beginner to professional in 10 lessons.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right, from beginner to professional in 10 hours. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, how are you defining professional, love? They're just mis-selling how a developmental skill works. It
Right.
cannot be fast tracked. It just takes how long it takes, right? Because
Yes.
there's muscles involved, and muscles don't develop high levels of coordination quickly. It just doesn't
Right.
work that way. So anyway, back to this lovely girl. So first thing, I said we're going to put the lessons on hold whilst I send you for drum lessons. So I was teaching a vocal tech at the time, and I knew the drum tech, which was the associated, drum college.
Yes.
She loved it. I think she actually kept up with it in the end. She loved it so much. But what it did is it showed her where the heartbeat of music is. She couldn't ignore it when she was having to lay it down herself physically, which is what I was hoping that it would do. And it did it beautifully and did it quickly. So
Hmm.
then she came back. Then it's my job to deal with the pitch side.
Woo.
And I thought, okay, hold on to your hat, honey. Here we go. So how I decided to tackle this was, where can you sing? Sing me the range of notes that come out of your voice now accurately, because she didn't grow up with a piano or a guitar or anything like that, so there's no point me playing her notes on the piano and trying to get her to pitch it,
No, no,
and
no, no.
because it's not a familiar sound to her, right?
No.
So I wanted to go with what she could do
Uh-huh.
rather than demoralizing her potentially with what she couldn't do,
Interesting.
right?
Okay.
So what can you do? Let me define for you the range of notes you currently can reproduce. So I matched her, not the other way around, right? So we did that for a while, and then I was able to use that core of vocal range that she could control and just develop it from there, outwards, outwards, outwards. And I'm very pleased to say that within 3 years, and I didn't teach her the whole time through that 3 years, it was
No,
sporadic,
no.
she wanted to go through the grading system. That was important for her. It certainly wasn't something that I was used to doing. But she said, I want to do, I want hit points.
Right.
I want achievement, quantifiable achievement
Right.
of various stages that I'm at. I want a goal to work towards.
Right.
Great, let's do it. So she did the pop grades for London College of Music.
Right.
And with no word of a lie, she got to grade 8 within 3 years.
Fantastic. Now tell me this: when you asked her that first question, what can you do?
Yeah.
Tell me what she could do then, that you said, well, at least there's a basis to build on.
Yeah, she was able to sing probably, oh God, this is a while ago, but my memory is it was maybe around an octave or so.
Right. But what did she sing, for instance? Could she sing a bit of a song in one octave?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, I just said, sing me whatever you can sing.
And was it in tune with herself? I mean, she wasn't singing to
as in the intervals from note to note? No. But what I was, so not only was she out of key, meaning she couldn't stick to a key.
Yes.
The intervallic side, which is out of tune, the tune being messed up,
yeah.
was also the case, right?
Wow.
So she actually had both, right?
Yeah.
So, but it was only through lack of familiarity. She hadn't grown up with it. It just wasn't part of her family culture or whatever.
Right.
And it was just total lack of familiarity. So by the time she became more and more and more familiar with it and worked her butt off, that was very much part of the success of this story.
Right.
How hard she worked. I didn't know whether it could be done or not. Well, she taught me so much about what actual grit and determination will get you.
Fantastic story, Kim, and something which I've always thought, you really, really can't teach being in time and in tune, but that story has actually changed my mind. But you need to add to it that grit and determination.
And it didn't take 10 years.
Yes.
The fact that it only took 3 was astonishing to me.
Well, that's just an incredible story, Kim. And do you think that the real reason why you're able to do just about anything is because you're Australian? Do you think that's the reason?
No. I mean, I know Aussies very much have a can-do attitude.
Yes, definitely. They do.
Yeah, they do. But no, I don't think that's particularly relevant.
Okay, well,
4% of the population has congenital amnesia.
Yes. Well, I love when you say that.
Which is the medical term for tone deafness.
Mm.
So that means that there's a neurological impasse.
Yeah.
Is the only way I can describe it, where they literally cannot process pitch properly. So it's not an ear thing, it's not a voice thing, it's a neurological impairment. Quite often the strategy most people go to is, can you match this note? La, la. That's here, have a listen. La, la, right? And there's a requirement for the pitch impaired person to match a note on an instrument they're not even familiar with the sound of.
In a smaller example of that, I once had to do a jingle with an actor who was a very nice, charming guy, but he was completely tone deaf. He couldn't, and I had to get him to sing a commercial. And that was my job. And so I knew I had 3 hours in the studio with this guy. So the technique that I invented sort of right there on the spot, because I had no idea that the guy couldn't sing. I didn't realize that he couldn't sing at all.
And this presumably the days before auto-tune, Melodyne, blah, blah, blah.
Way before that. I said to the guy, I'll tell you what, because I realized, in the first 3 minutes that he could not tell the difference between one note and another. But what I'd had him do was I had him, because the backing track was already recorded.
Yeah.
So I said to him, here's what I'd like you to do. And I had him do the portamento thing. I went, okay. And when he got to a certain point that was the note of the piece, because I said, stop there. And I said, now I want you to don't think about the note. Think about how it feels in your throat to sing there. Now do it again. And tell me when you get to it. And he said, he was near it. And I did that for about 10 minutes. And he finally got to that pitch. And purely by the feel in his throat, how it felt in his head. And then we started the song and we recorded maybe the first 4 words. Then I stopped. I worked on the next 4, but I did it all through the sliding technique.
So that would also presuppose that he had pretty good kinesthetic awareness. So meaning that he was able to feel it. I've got a number of clients who don't feel anything.
Well, he was an actor, you see, so he was used to using his voice, and a very fine actor. So, I actually asked him, I said, do a Shakespearean voice, now do a little kid's voice. Now, and he could do that perfectly. So he knew how things felt in his throat.
There you go. So the kinesthetic awareness is what you were able to use. So yet again, that's another thing that it's good to be aware of in working with anybody is, are they visually oriented? So therefore, you've got to kind of show them stuff. Are they ear oriented? So they've got to hear it, and do it by sound or feeling or any combination of those 3.
Yes. Well, as I say, Kim, this has just been fantastic and wonderful, and I am going to bring it to a close so you can get.
I know we could talk all day, couldn't we?
I know we could.
Every possible topic.
I know. I love doing this, but you can
solve the world. We could solve the world's ills.
I'm just really happy. I want to thank you for doing this, and I hope we can do this again, because I'm sure that my listeners are going to be knocked out at this amazing masterclass that you've done in the whole world of singing, vocals, and being fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you as one of my mentors over the years, and also colleague. I mean, for God's sake, how long is it now? It's got to be over. It's more than 20 years, Richard.
Yes, it is more than that. And we were also teachers together at that same school. We
were. Yes, because I hired you. Remember?
That's right, you did, and that was very good of you. Thank you for that. Yes. And Kim's work is featured in this wonderful book, which was the Banzilla songbook from the album Banzilla, which you can all get, and you can hear Kim just doing impossible stuff over and over again, to the point where the engineer who was mixing it said, "Oh, you've already auto-tuned all these vocals." And I said, "No, I haven't." And he said, "Well, that's impossible." And I said, "No, it's not impossible. It's Kim Chandler." So,
and also the book behind you.
And the book behind me, Adventures in Arranging, where Kim has a nice page in this book. It's all the techniques that I've used over the many years on arranging for pop records and other kinds of fun things. And Kim did a very nice page in the book for me about vocules.
Yes, that is true. So if people want to find me anywhere, it's my main website, which is hideously out of date now because I'm just too busy to update it. That is the reality.
Yes.
www.kimchandler.com. That's right.
Yes.
KimChandler.com.
Yes, so okay. It's across the screen right now.
Yeah, good. Funkyandfun.com. So FUNKYNFUN.com for my wonderful vocal exercises.
Oh, yeah. You got to get those vocal exercises.
Kick your ass. They will kick your ass.
Okay.
And my online recording service is virtualvocals.com.
Very nice. And we all love it. And anybody who doesn't take advantage of Kim's expertise and fun and funkiness is crazy. So do that. And thank you for being on Radio Richard, the greatest interviews you'll ever hear on music, and the greatest music you'll ever hear on interviews.
Thank you. Bye.
Richard Niles on the radio, check it